in Indian cultural and historical facts and culture. Though we started in Greenwich, our organization has grown to serve the diverse communities of Fairfield and Westchester counties. We offer an array of programs, including children's literacy classes, programs for seniors, and events for the public, such as the upcoming talk with the bestseller author Alka Joshi, and of course, tonight's event on Vipassana meditation. The practice of meditation dates back thousands of years in India. The oldest documented evidence of the practice are wall arts in the Indian subcontinent from approximately 5,000 to 3,500 BCE, showing people seated in meditative postures with half-closed eyes. Written evidence can be found as far back as 1500 BCE in the earliest Hindu scriptures of the Vedas. Meditation in ancient India was practiced as a spiritual exercise and to acquire knowledge and gain self-awareness and oneness with the absolute. Though an ancient practice, the relevance of meditation in our busy, anxiety-filled lives is profound. In fact, a fascinating brain scan study done a few years ago by Harvard Medical School neuroscientist Sarah Lazar showed that after 8 weeks of meditation, the brains of new meditators thickened in the areas of the brain that cater to self-relevance, learning, cognition, memory, emotional regulation, compassion, and the production of regulatory neurotransmitters. The areas of the brains of new meditators related to anxiety, fear, and stress became smaller over time. This is science that is too compelling to ignore. Tonight's discussion is focused around the Vipassana technique of meditation. This technique is considered the one used by Buddha more than 2,500 years ago. I know several people personally who have attended Vipassana meditation retreats, including my husband, Dan. They have all reported transformational benefits to their lives. With that, I am excited to introduce our panelists. Barry Lapping is a founder of the Vipassana Center in Shelburne, Massachusetts, called Dhamma Dharā. Founded in 1982, Dhamma Dharā was the first Vipassana center outside of India. Barry is a student of the late S.N. Goenka ji and is a teacher and director of the Dhamma Dharā Center. Nitin Jindal recently joined the ICC Board of Directors. He's a partner at Goldman Sachs in the Global Markets Division. He attended a 10-day meditation retreat at the Dhammapakasa in the Chicago area in 2015. And Charles Mitchell is an attorney with a private practice in New York City in labor management relations, real estate transactions, estate planning, and commercial transaction litigation. He is an active member of the Williams College alumni and VP of the Williams Club. Charles spent 3 months practicing Vipassana meditation at Dhamma Dharā in 2000. Barry, it is now my honor to welcome you to ICC. Thank you for being here today, and we're anxious to hear from you. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mudita. With that wonderful introduction, I would like to introduce my teacher, S.N. Goenka ji. He is Indian, but he's born and raised in Mandalay, Burma, and to a very conservative Hindu family. He grew up studying the scriptures. He grew up giving lectures on Bhagavad Gita, Upanishads, and many more scriptures. He went into the family business at a very young age, did not go to university, but he was extremely successful in the family business in his early 20s. He was a trustee, a president, a secretary, treasurer of many different Hindu organizations in Burma. Because of all the stress that he experienced through his business and busy life, he developed a type of very severe migraine headache. His doctors advised him to travel outside the country because there was no known cure for these headaches, and the only thing that helped him was taking morphine. So he did as advised, and he traveled the world. He went to the best doctors in Europe, North America, Asia, Germany, all over, and he came back to Burma worse. A friend of his who felt that maybe this illness that he had was stress-related advised him to take a course in Vipassana meditation from who became his teacher, Sayagyi Uba Khin. Uba Khin was the Accountant General of Burma and a renowned meditation teacher as well. This gave Goenka enormous transformational change. It just made a huge difference in his life. For 14 years after that course, he kept up all his responsibilities to his family, to his business. And in 1969, he emigrated from Burma to India, where he taught his first Vipassana course. Specifically, he was going there for his parents who had already emigrated to India. So he went there, he taught his two parents, as well as 12 other people. After that, the floodgates were open, and Goenka just started teaching course after course, including many people from outside of India, and currently it is spread all over India. So let's now play a video, a 17-minute introductory video of Goenka, and then we'll have a discussion after that. Thank you.
Certainly you are all curious to know as to what is being taught in this meditation center. Not only in this meditation center, but in all the Vipassana meditation centers in the country and abroad, no religious dogma is being taught. Only a way of life is taught. How to live peacefully, how to live harmoniously within, and how to generate nothing but peace and harmony for others. An art of living. Which has nothing to do with any organized religion, nothing to do with any blind belief or dogma, rites or rituals. A way of life, a good way of life. Therefore, people who join the course of 10 days of Vipassana, and they have to take a vow that they will observe 5 precepts, and the precepts are that I will abstain from killing, I will abstain from stealing, I will abstain from sexual misconduct, I will abstain from speaking lies, I will abstain from taking any kind of intoxicants. A moral way of life, good for everyone, accepted by every religion, preached by every religion, and yet very difficult to observe. And the main reason why it is difficult to observe is that one has no control over one's mind. A drunkard knows very well that I should not drink. A gambler knows very well that I should not gamble. Similarly, anyone indulged in any kind of misconduct knows very well, this is not good for me, I should not do it. And yet, one cannot abstain from doing that because one has no control over the mind. Therefore, after taking these 5 precepts, the first thing that is taught is how to develop mastery over one's own mind. To develop mastery over the mind, one has to train the mind to get concentrated on one object or the other. And the object that is given here is universal, because the whole path is universal. It is not sectarian. It has nothing to do with any organized religion. Therefore, the object of concentration of the mind is also universal. It is not sectarian. The student is asked to develop the concentration of the mind by observing one's own respiration. Pure respiration, bare respiration, natural respiration, as it comes in, as it goes out. Just keep on observing it. Do nothing. Never try to regulate the breath. Let the nature play its own role. If the breath is deep, you are just aware it is deep. If it is shallow, you are just aware it is shallow. If it is passing to left nostril, you are aware it is passing to the left nostril. If it is passing to the right nostril, you are just aware it is passing to the right nostril. That's all. Just remain aware. Awareness. Awareness of your own respiration as it comes in, as it goes out naturally. Now the object is such which is acceptable to one and all. A Hindu can practice with this object, a Muslim can practice with this object, a Buddhist, a Jain, a Christian, a Jew. There's no difference. Anyone. Because the breath is universal. We don't ask people to use certain words in name of this god or that goddess. We don't want people to imagine the shape or the form of this god or that goddess, then it will become sectarian. But just observing the breath as it is, as it comes in, as it goes out, it makes the object universal. One trains the mind to get concentrated. That means one develops the mastery over one's own mind. But this alone is not sufficient. One may be master of one's own mind and yet may be involved in unwholesome actions, physical as well as oral, and may harm others. The next step, and very important step, is to get the mind purified. If the mind is purified, and one has control over the purified mind, then there is no danger of misusing it. A purified mind cannot harm anybody. And the next step to purify the mind is again non-sectarian, it is universal. One is asked to observe one's own mind. One is asked to observe the biochemical reactions in the body because of the mind and mental contents. Say, for example, an impurity arises in the mind, and anger is a reason, or hatred is a reason, or ill will, animosity. What starts happening in the body? There is some unpleasant sensation on the body. One is asked to observe that sensation. There might be heat in the whole body. The palpitation might increase. Tension might get built up. Do nothing, just observe it. Just accept the fact that there is anger which has arisen in my mind at this moment, and look, there is heat in my body, or the palpitation has increased, or there is tension, whatever it is. Just observe that and accept the fact that my mind is at present full of this particular negativity. And you will find that you are coming out of it. You have not suppressed it. You have not given it a free license. And then something wrong at the vocal and physical level. You have just observed. Observing, 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 layers after layers of this impurity get peeled off, and one comes out of it. Not only that, if one continues to practice like this, one comes out of a particular habit pattern of which one has become a slave. Everyone has become a slave of one's own habit pattern, behavior pattern. Whenever one experiences something pleasant, the behavior pattern has become to react with craving, with clinging. Similarly, whenever one faces something unpleasant, the behavior pattern has become to react with anger, with aversion, with hatred. And in both the cases, one becomes very agitated, very irritated. By this practice, one slowly breaks this behavior pattern and starts coming out of it. Whenever one generates negativity, one becomes very agitated, very miserable. When we call oneself a Hindu or a Muslim or a Jain or a Christian or a Jewish, it makes no difference. A human being is a human being. And as soon as you generate any negativity in the mind, you are bound to become miserable. And when you become miserable with the negativity, you never keep this misery limited to yourself. You start throwing this misery all around you. You start distributing this misery to others. You make everyone else miserable. You make the entire atmosphere around you so tense. Anyone who comes in contact with you at that time becomes miserable, unhappy. Certainly, this is not a way of life. This is not a good way of life. This technique teaches you how to live a good way of life, how to live peacefully, how to live harmoniously, how to generate nothing but peace and harmony within oneself, for oneself, and how to generate nothing but peace and harmony for others, so that people who come in contact, they also feel very peaceful, very harmonious. The 5 precepts that one takes in the beginning, one understands at the intellectual level that they are so good. Human being is a social being, one has to live in the society. One should not do anything at the physical or vocal level which will disturb the peace and harmony of others, which will harm and hurt others. Therefore, these precepts are very essential. But as one proceeds on this path, it becomes so clear that the sages and saints of the past advised us to live the life of morality, because it is not only for the good of others, but also for our own good. The meditator starts realizing that whenever I perform any unwholesome action at the vocal level or at the physical level, I can't perform it unless I generate some negativity or the other, some impurity or the other in my own mind. If I have to kill somebody, I must generate tremendous amount of anger, hatred, ill will, and then only I can kill somebody. Similarly, for every vice, every unwholesome action of the body or the speech, one has to generate some defilement, some impurity in the mind. And it becomes so clear to a meditator of Vipassana, because Vipassana is nothing but to observe the reality, the truth within oneself from moment to moment. Observing this truth from moment to moment, one starts realizing that whenever I have generated any negativity in my mind, I become very miserable, very miserable. So whenever I try to harm others, at the physical level or vocal level, I can't harm anybody unless I have first harmed myself. Because I have to generate negativity in my mind to harm others, and when I start negativity in my mind, I become miserable. So I have been generating misery for myself. Now it becomes so clear that when I observe these 5 precepts, I am not obliging anybody. I am obliging myself. I am doing all this for my own good. Real self-interest will become so clear. In my own good, I should not perform any action at the physical level or vocal level which will disturb others. Because as soon as I get involved in anything like this, I start harming myself by generating a negativity and becoming miserable. As one develops in this technique, it becomes so easy to live the life, a good life, a life of morality, because one starts understanding at the actual level, at the experiential level, that living good life is not only for the good of others, but for my good also. More for my good. It will become so clear. The entire path, the five precepts, controlling the mind with the aid of the breath, natural breath, purifying the mind by observing the body sensations, by observing the mental contents, is universal. Anybody can do this. That is the reason why not only in this center, but in all the centers around the world, people from different communities, different countries, belonging to different religious groups, they come, meditate, and get the same advantage. No conversion is involved. One does not come here to get converted from one organized religion to another organized religion. This technique has nothing to do to convert people in a particular organized religion, because this technique is not bound by any particular organized religion. It is universal. Although taught by Gautama the Buddha, but his teaching was universal. He was not interested in converting people in any particular sect. He was not interested to establish a sect. Suffering humanity, if they get this wonderful technique, they will come out of their misery. And in the same tradition, people are given this technique so that they come out of their misery. A Hindu may continue to call himself a Hindu for the whole life, a Muslim, a Christian, a Jain, a Buddhist, makes no difference. One becomes a good human being. And the technique, the Dhamma, the universal Dhamma, is to make you a good human being. If one is not a good human being, how can one be a good Hindu, or a good Muslim, or a good Christian, or a good Buddhist, or a good Jain? Good human being. Therefore, no conversion as such is involved. Although conversion is involved, the conversion is that you will get converted from misery to happiness. You will get converted from bondage to liberation. You will get converted from ignorance to enlightenment. Take advantage of this technique. May all of you find time to give a trial to this technique for your own good and for the good of many, for the benefit of many. May you all take advantage of this technique and come out of your misery to enjoy real peace, real harmony, real happiness. May all of you enjoy real peace, real harmony, real happiness, real happiness.
Hello, everyone. I think we should start. Just some housekeeping issues. If there are any question and answers, please just put them in the Q&A box in the Zoom chat, and ICC will be monitoring them. And towards the end of the conversation, we'll take up the questions. Hopefully, we can get all the questions answered. And we'll start the panel now. Barry, let's just start with some very simple questions around the technique. Could you just explain to us what is the origin of this technique? Where did it originate? Where did it start? How old it is, etc.
As Mudita said in her introduction, the spiritual practice of meditation has existed in India for many thousands of years, more than 5,000 years. A prince arose about 2,600 years ago. His name was Siddharth Gautama. He lived on the border of Nepal and India. He practiced all the different techniques of the day. He had the best teachers of the day. He mastered all of the concentration exercises. After he renounced life, he saw that life as a prince in the palace still was filled with unhappiness. he still had anger, he still had fear, he still had aversion. So he renounced his life and he started practicing. After 6 years of different kinds of meditation practice, he discovered himself this technique of Vipassana. And simply put, Vipassana was just the observation of how natural law works within our own mind and body. We'll talk a little more about the technique later on. But after his enlightenment, he taught for another 45 years. And at that time, the practice of Vipassana spread in northern India for many hundreds of years. After about 300 years, Emperor Ashoka, northern India, he was also known as Ashoka the Terrible. He killed people, maimed people, was very miserable. But for whatever good karma he had, he came across the Dhamma, he came across his technique of Vipassana. He then became known as Dhamma Ashoka, meaning master of Dhamma. He spread Dhamma throughout India, and then he figured, why just India? And he sent his emissaries to neighboring countries, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Burma, Cambodian, Laos, Thailand, like that. During those first 500 years, the Dhamma spread very purely in northern India, throughout India. But after some time, due to some vested interest, it started to get polluted and it started to diminish. But fortunately, in the neighboring country of Burma, the technique was kept in its pure form, both in theory and in practice. When Goenka finally started practicing, when he met his teacher, Sayagyi U Ba had a strong belief, the people in Burma had a strong belief that after 2,500 years, after the beginning, the discovery of Vipassana, it would once again leave Burma and go back to India. It was just about that time that Goenka left Burma, came back to India. Originally had come back to India just on a 3-month visa to teach his parents. But once he started teaching, he was wonderstruck. People from all over India started coming to courses. People from all over the world started coming from courses. And this went on for about 10 years. After 10 years, Goenka himself left India and started teaching around the world. So we are extremely grateful to India because the Buddha discovered the Dhamma, the Vipassana technique there, which is really just the law of science, science of mind and matter. And then we're also grateful that Goenka came back to India and spread it around the world.
Thank you. The second thing is, well, this is a Buddhist technique. So does one have to be Buddhist to practice it? Is it associated with any religion? And I know we heard it in the talk from Goenka, but it'll be great if you could quickly touch on that.
I would ask the question of everybody, not just on this panel, but all the viewers as well. Is science a particular religion? Is it Indian science? Is it American science? Is it Russian science or Chinese science? The reason the Buddha became the Buddha was because he wanted to discover how this mind and body worked. Goenka was very fond of saying that Buddha was a super scientist. Buddha never used the word Buddhist. He called it Dhamma, which means law of nature. So a short answer to your question, Nitin, is that one does not need to be a Buddhist. One does not need to be any particular religion. In fact, as I said in the introduction, Goenka grew up as a very staunch conservative Hindu. And yet, once he practiced, one thing he often said was, once he started practicing, he understood more or better the Bhagavad Gita, Upanishads, and other Indian scriptures that all said, don't lie, don't kill, don't steal, all of the precepts that Goenka just spoke of. But when he started practicing Vipassana, Goenka understood this is how not to kill, how not to lie, how not to steal. And that's true of every human being. The law of nature, the laws of science, of how this mind and body work are not tied to any particular religion. They're tied to the nature of human beings. So no, you do not need to be a Buddhist. In fact, I'll tell you a very quick story. When Goenka was talking to a number of Buddhist monks, He actually challenged them. And he said, look through all of your scriptures and tell me where you find the word Buddhism. They could not.
Thank you. On that front, there are several forms of meditation. There is, Buddhist meditation, Zen meditation, Kundalini, meditations which use particular mantras. How is Vipassana different?
Well, as I said just recently or previously, Vipassana is the law of nature. It is the law of science. It is not tied to a particular religion. It is because it is just the science of mind and body. It is just the law of nature. It is not tied to a particular religion, a particular mantra, a particular visualization. So it goes beyond religion. One can be a religious human being and practice morality, concentration, and wisdom. One can be a complete atheist and practice the same thing. So all one really needs to do is practice the observation of oneself. Now, I cannot comment on all the different practices that you just mentioned, but I can say that many of them are tied to particular sects, are tied to particular religions, are tied to particular maybe mantras or visualizations that have specific meaning to a particular religion. Vipassana as itself is not tied to any religion, though we are extremely grateful to Gautama the Buddha and the lineage of teachers from that time who have preserved this. And we're very grateful to the monks, the Buddhist monks who preserve this. The actual practice of Vipassana is not Buddhist, is not religious.
Thank you. Very quickly, what is the ultimate goal of the practice? Is it just simply, become more mindful? Is it simply become more relaxed, or there is more to it?
To become more mindful, to become more relaxed are byproducts. Just as Goenka actually cured his migraine headaches by the practice of Vipassana, as his teacher told him, the cure of physical ailments is merely a byproduct of the purification of mind. And this is what Vipassana, the goal of Vipassana is. It is the complete and total purification of mind, of all the anger, the fear, the greed, the hatred, the ignorance. When we can eliminate those qualities, those complexes of our minds, then we're able to develop real love, real compassion, real joy, real mindfulness. And that is the goal of Vipassana. It's not a stress reduction technique. It is not a relaxation technique. It is a technique of the purification of mind, of all the miseries that we all have deep inside.
Is there a particular basis? Is there a scientific basis around it? Or this is just something, you got to believe it to and just follow it?
Another quick story here is a number of people went to the Buddha and said, well, we can't really believe this, that, or the other thing. We may believe this and this, but I don't know about all this other stuff. And he just smiled and said, good. Don't accept anything blindly. In fact, the technique of Vipassana is to observe things as they really are, not as someone else says they are, not as some scripture or religion says they are, but by your own observation of your mind and your body, you will begin to understand how we keep on tying up knots deep inside ourselves by the laws of science, the law of nature. And by understanding that, we can now change that process so we can decondition the mind. The mind is deconditioned. Vipassana, simply put, is the science of understanding nature and deconditioning the mind.
Let's go to learning. We have heard about these 10-day courses. There are several centers around the country. You run one of them. Why can't I just learn the technique by reading a book or sitting at my home?
You can learn all about the technique by reading a book, by listening to a discourse on YouTube, anywhere. But that is not going to be the same as experiential. You may talk about it, you may hear about it, you can even try to practice it, but look what we are up against. We're up against the conditioning of our mind. Another very quick story is the Buddha said that if a warrior were to face 1,000 other warriors, single-handedly defeat them all, and do that every day for 1,000 days, he would not call that person a victor. But he does call the person a victor who goes deep inside themselves and purifies their mind, deconditions their mind of all the greed, hatred, and ignorance. It is that difficult. It's very easy to go down Niagara Falls. It's pretty difficult to go up Niagara Falls. So these 10 days is actually a very short investment of time. And we're going to hear this from both Nitin and Charles. It's an extremely short investment in time to try to change the habit pattern, or to understand an outline of how to change the habit pattern of our own minds, and then it becomes a lifetime job. You must withdraw from the world for 10 days to give yourself the opportunity to get deep inside your own mind and observe how things are working. Absolute must.
Thank you. Charles, may I ask you a few questions about your experiences?
Sure.
We heard that you went to Dhamma Dharā in 2000. Did you consider other practices? Did you have any other meditation practice prior to going to Dhamma Dharā? What specifically drew you towards Vipassana?
Well, those are several questions. I'll start with the history, and that is that I was raised as an Episcopalian and certainly taught to pray and meditate. I went to a Quaker school and began meditating at school in the Quaker tradition in kindergarten, and stayed there for 13 years. But I also tried other forms of transcendental and mindfulness meditation. But as time passed and I got into my 40s, I found myself challenged on many different levels, and I was looking for something that would help. And a Roman Catholic nun had been to the meditation center in Shelburne, Massachusetts, and she suggested that I go there. So I didn't really know what I was going to get into, but I knew I wanted to go to a quiet place. And that is certainly what this was, but it was more than a quiet place. It was a place that just transformed my whole life and gave me a chance to sit with myself, to be with myself, and to learn a practice that would be life-changing.
Thank you. You went there 20 years ago. Could you tell us about your practice? Is it a daily practice over the last 20 years? Is it something which you draw upon as and when needed? If you could put some insights into, as a practitioner, how does it manifest itself?
Well, it's amazing, Nitin, because there are not many things in life that have stuck with me, but this is something that I began to do in 2000, and I have continued to do every day since then. And I do it I start my day in the morning in meditation, and I make it a daily practice to sit as long as I can. It'll stretch sometimes from a half an hour. I like to get in an hour. Sometimes it's an hour and a half. Sometimes it's 2 hours. And then as I go through the day, it's now become a part of my life. So as I go through my day and I find myself either having some strong sensations, having some strong feelings, or feeling anxious or uncomfortable, or finding myself getting a bit agitated, I now am aware that I can stop right there and I can calm myself down. And if I'm in my office or somewhere where I can find a quiet space, and I often do it at lunchtime, I'll just find some time to sit and to observe myself, my feelings. I observe my breath, and I just ask myself over and over again, what are my sensations? What's going on? And try to focus on that rather than whatever else might be appearing to be the distraction.
So, Charles, it kind of if I had to paraphrase, the effect of being a practitioner made you a calmer, more self-aware person. Did it have an impact on the relationships you had, either at workplace and or in your personal life, close relationships, etc., with your children?
I'd say it's had an outstanding impact on all of my relationships, starting with myself. So the first thing I had to learn to do was to sit with myself, to be with myself, and come to better learn to love myself. And then I think it's also helped me be more appreciative of others. It certainly improved my relationships with my friends, improved my relationships with my family. And then as I went back to the work world, I found that I was more aware of how I showed up at meetings and much more willing to listen to others. And I found that I didn't have to be the type of lawyer that I originally thought I had to be. I originally thought I had to be the kind of lawyer that was aggressive, was able to kick the door down and cause all kind of creation, all kind of commotion. But instead, I now choose the peaceful path, and I try to find a way to listen to what's going on and find a way to problem solve.
You are an attorney, and you briefly mentioned, has it changed how you practice law in any manner?
Well, in all manners. I mean, I used to be quite an aggressive attorney. I was doing some work, actually union busting, and did a lot of work in some tough areas with some tough people. And I found that number one, I didn't want to do that. Number two, I wanted to work in ways where I could help people solve problems. So I moved more towards estate law. I moved more towards real estate transactions. And I also find even in litigation that I've learned to just kind of put my ear to the ground on each case and try to see, well, what are the real issues here? What are the real differences of opinion? And where is the middle ground? And how can I bring about a resolution? No one wants to fight. Everybody has some ultimate goal of problem resolution, and that's helped me focus on that.
Thank you. I would just quickly remind, if there are any questions, they can just be put in the Q&A box. Barry, going back to the technique, one thing which we heard about were the 5 precepts. Why are they relevant? Why do they matter so much? And why does one have to take a vow before one starts that practice? Could you explain the relevance to us?
It's extremely relevant. In fact, it is the foundation of the practice of Vipassana meditation. If one is killing, lying, stealing, committing some kind of sexual misconduct, getting intoxicated, all those things cause enormous agitation in the mind. And here we are, we want to practice a technique that is going to purify our minds. And at the same time, if we're not living by that moral code, then we're doing all these things that are just going to make our minds even more impure. So that morality, that shila, is absolutely critical to calm the mind down at a certain level of physical and verbal interactions to enable us to at least start the practice of developing concentration. So the mind gets a little bit calmer just by observing those precepts, which enable us to practice samadhi or concentration, which will then in turn enable us to practice vipassana. So that morality is the foundation of the entire practice. Absolutely critical.
So another way of saying it is that if you want to become a better human being, stop becoming a worse human being and just
Yeah.
create a baseline of saying, okay, look, whatever I've done from here on, at least for the 10 days, I'm going to not make it any worse, and hopefully then I can learn a few things to become better.
That's absolutely correct. And just imagine, Nitin, if all of the major religions of the world and even philosophies of the world. They all talk about not killing, not lying, not stealing, the 10 Commandments and so forth and so forth. It's there for all. If the world would just practice that much, it would be a wonderful world. But in our situation, we have to practice. That's just the beginning. So we have to practice that to develop a base to be able to go further.
Thank you. Charles, a lot of people who are watching today are parents. You have kids yourself. In your opinion, as a dad, is this something which children, young children, should get involved in? Do you think it's helpful for children?
Without question, I think it's very important for children to learn as early as possible. Number one, to follow the 5 precepts, but also to understand that whenever we generate negative emotions and negative feelings, the one we're hurting the most is ourselves. So I think that as children learn to settle down a bit, learn a way of coping with their feelings, with the realities of their lives, I think having a meditation practice is a great way to adjust to life and find a way to live a more peaceful, happy life. I have a 15-year-old, and I had her go to a course several years ago, and I noticed that she does really appreciate quiet time. She can quiet herself.
So on that note, Barry, is there a program for children?
There is a program for children. Thank you for asking, because I was about to interrupt Charles and I wouldn't want to do that. The fact is, many, even first of all, to start with, pregnant women often come to courses, and that has an incredibly beneficial impact on that unborn child. But as far as courses for children are concerned, we have courses for children from 8 to 12 years old. They're usually one-day courses, and they take those moral precepts they're called promises for the children, and then they practice the technique of Anapana, which is the awareness of respiration, which is a concentration technique, for the rest of the day. There are also teenage courses from ages 13 to 17, in which they essentially do the same thing, but some of those courses are over a weekend. They may start on a Friday night, maybe end on a Sunday morning. Right now, during this time of COVID, they're all one-day courses. We have found that children that do practice this technique of Anapana are much calmer, much more peaceful. In fact, if they're getting ready to go into an exam, they might even practice 5 or 10 minutes of Anapana just to help calm down the mind. Instead of trying to rush and memorize everything, if we can calm down the mind, we're going to be much better in our studies. And the relationship in our own families, if the parents are meditators and the children start practicing, even parents teaching the children at a very young age, let them come and sit with the parents for a few minutes at a very young age, it has an extremely beneficial impact. We've also seen many children, once they turn 18, come and do regular 10-day courses. So yeah, there are children's courses. It's a program globally, big program, very helpful.
I think we're all products of our environments, and I think beginning as a child and being in an environment that is meditative is very helpful.
If some of our audiences wanted to attend the program, could you quickly tell us about the process? Is there an application? Is there a qualification?
Are we talking about a 10-day course or a children's course?
10-day course.
10-day course, there is an application process. Qualifications are that you need to be a normal human being. You need to be able to make a strong determination that you're actually ready to observe yourself in a very structured way for this period of 10 days. Because when you do a course, it's not easy. Like I said before, it's probably the hardest thing a human being can do, as well as the most beneficial. So in this time of COVID, we are still having courses at all of our centers, actually, in North America and in other parts of the world as well. The application process is a little stricter because of COVID. We do ask some health-related questions in that regard. And the numbers are much smaller that we're able to serve. but the courses are going on. So that's really the only qualifications. Apply early and be a normal human being.
Yeah, I relate to that. You know, if I ever tell anybody that I did a 10-day course and they say, oh, you did a retreat, I was like, no, it was a boot camp. I wouldn't call it a retreat, because a retreat in my mind sounds, you know, going to a nice place where, you know, it's really comfortable. I was like, no, this was the hardest thing I did. And, you know, boot camp is the only word I will use.
That word actually has been used over decades, Nitin. It is a boot camp for the mind, but you need that training to go on to specialization.
Totally agree. Is there a money back guarantee?
Absolutely. Whatever you give, you will get back. Actually, more than many times, you will get a return on investment. There's no question about it. But we can talk a little bit about how much it does cost. And there are no fixed charges. It's not like you come for 10 days and it will cost you $2,000. You understand when you come to a course like this that everything you've received, room, board, teachings, there's never been a price tag on these teachings, but everything that you receive is because of the donation of grateful old students who have come before you. They found themselves benefited and they wanted to give back so that others could receive the same benefit. So it's a very unique business model where there are no fixed charges. We will give you back whatever you want. How's that? There are no money back issues here.
Yeah. Barry, isn't it true that there is one specific reason why there is no charge for the course? Because when I remember when I took the course on 9th day, when there was a discourse on Dana, it was specifically pointed out that one reason the course is free, so that and I'm trying to refresh my memory, but I'm sure you'll do a much better job, that it was so that I don't let pride come into and interfere with my training. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, pride is one thing. Our egos, meaning pride, is another thing. But the fact is, when you come to a course like this and there are no charges, one comes as a nun, one comes as a monk, one comes as a renunciate. I'm giving up everything, although I'm not shaving my head or changing my clothes and putting on some kind of robes. I am renouncing the world for a period of 10 days. And therefore, as a monk or a nun, I accept whatever is given. And I'm grateful for it. Whatever food comes on my plate, I am very happy for that. With that kind of basis, at the end of the course, starting on day 10 and 11 morning, or any other time afterward, if one feels that they have been benefited, and there maybe the ego has dissolved a little bit, and maybe I have been benefited by this practice of 10 days, then I'm now in a position to donate, but not pay my price tag, not pay my bill, but I'm donating with the understanding that whatever I donate according to my own capacity is for the benefit of those who will be coming. So it's a really beneficial way of practicing all the way around.
Excellent. I have one more question, and then there are a bunch of questions we have from our audience. Why is it important to have a follow-on practice? You know, I went to the 10-day camp. I learned a lot, and you know, I have all that knowledge now. Why do I need to sit every day and keep, you know, repeating it?
You may have a lot of knowledge, but do you have a lot of wisdom? And the whole purpose of a Vipassana course is to apply it in life. It must be applied every day in our living, as Charles has been explaining to us. And we, as we take a shower every day to clean our bodies, as we feed ourselves every day to nourish our bodies, so also every day we are continually reacting to the different situations of our life, the different vicissitudes of life, and therefore we keep on tying up new knots, new tensions, new stress. Now imagine if you had a technique that in the morning, in the evening, you sit for an hour each time, and you clean off all of that stress, all of that strain. It keeps you very balanced. It will keep you much more focused, and it'll keep you as much happier and able to work in the world. We're not here to run away from the world, but learn how to live in the world. So that daily practice is extremely important. We don't miss our meals. We don't miss our showers. Why would we want to miss keeping that which is closest thing to us is our minds? Why would we want to miss keeping that together? So daily practice is critical.
Charles, I have a quick question for you, and then I'll turn over to Mudita for questions from our audience. As a practicing lawyer with a very busy life, presumably busy life, and with your family and children, how hard it was to integrate a practice in your daily life? How do you find time to have a regular practice?
Well, by attending the center, I first of all learned to practice early in the morning. So at that time, it's particularly quiet. The rest of my household is not up. Much of the world around me is not up, and it's particularly quiet. And it's just a lovely time to sit quietly with myself and to begin my day on an even keel. But as I go through the day, it's important that I take some time to separate myself from whatever else is going on, so that I can collect myself, to be aware of what's going on with my body, and actually just to bring myself back to center.
Hey, Nitin, I have a quick question for you.
Of course.
This is off script, but I do have a question for you. As someone who has also taken a 10-day course, can you tell us a little bit about your experience when you went out to the center in Illinois?
I will. Just like Charles, I actually had no idea what I was signing up for. All I knew was there were a few of my friends who seemed calmer and were always smiling. And I was kind of like, that can't be true, they're just pretending to be happier. And then they educated me about the course, and I would ask them, what do you learn? I'm an engineer by training, so I like to kind of quantify everything and check a bunch of boxes. And the simple answer they kept giving me is like, you'll have to go yourself, and everybody gets different things out of it. And then when I went to the course, the first few days were very hard, because intellectually I had to untrain myself from what is meaning of life, etc. Because as somebody who lives in this society, financial success and what my title is, what my position is mattered, and somehow I related all those things to being content and happy. And they hear you're taking this course which is talking about detachment. You're taking this course which talks about how you can purify your mind, and that makes you better, but you really have to become a detached person. And I was like, if I detach myself from all these worldly belongings, I lose meaning of life. So it was very confusing. I tell you, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I just want to be out of here. But somehow I kind of stayed with it. I'm also stubborn. So I just finished the 10-day course. And then every so often I go back and listen to some of the discourses to remind myself of what the intellectual understanding is, and then kind of root myself back to just following a practice and getting the benefits. I would want to say one thing: it has not been easy. Just maintaining a practice itself has been hard. And there are times when I have not followed with the practice, and then I see how the benefits which had accrued over time by following a good practice start kind of disappearing. And then I remind myself and restart my practice and become even more strong in saying, no, I have to do this practice because I know that the benefits are real. I don't only know that from a intellectual perspective, I know it from an experiential perspective, because every time I follow practice, I sleep better, my mood's better, my concentration is better, and the benefits just so outweigh the effort I put in that, as you said, like the return on investment is so good. There is literally no reason why I shouldn't, why I wouldn't just literally do it as much as I can. I don't know. I kind of does that is that what roughly was your question?
I could ask you questions all night, but we'll leave it there. Let Mudita take over now.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that very interesting discussion. It's such a compelling practice for, you just make such a compelling case that, we should all think about how we get there in terms of what Vipassana meditation does for the mind, for the body, for relationships, for your daily lives. It's amazing that so few people have actually engaged in this practice that's thousands of years old and just as relevant today, if not more. So I have some questions from our viewers, and Barry, I'd like to start with the first question for you, which is, what is the origin of the word Vipassana, and what is the literal meaning of this word?
The origin is the Pali language in India, which was the spoken language in the days of the Buddha. Sanskrit was more the academic, religious, intellectual language. Pali was the common spoken language on the street. The word Vipassana means to see things as they really are, not as we think they are, not as we'd like them to be, not as someone else says they are, but as they really are. And the only way to do that is by observing with a balanced mind what is happening within this mind and body in an extremely structured way. So the way Goenka explains it is to observe things in a special way. That is the correct way.
So in a way, it's does that relate to self-realization?
You can say, I mean, whether there's a self, whether there's no self, that's for each human being to discover themselves. We are brought up in certain communities, certain religions that will tell us, this is your eternal soul, that's not your eternal soul. But the beauty of Vipassana, it says it's not going to say whether there's a soul or there's no eternal soul, but here's a technique, here is a microscope for you to observe yourself. So you can find out by direct experience what this thing called mudita actually is. Right now, there was a French philosopher that said, I think, therefore I am. That is not necessarily so. If I can observe how law of nature, how science is working within this mind and body process, then by direct experience, I'll know what this thing called I really is. That is Vipassana.
I'd like to go back to the boot camp description that Nitin described. One of the questions being asked is it physically a boot camp? Is it physically strenuous? And what exactly happens in those 10 days when you sit silently?
Who are you asking, Mudita?
Any one of you, actually. Nitin, why don't you describe?
I'll describe a day at the camp. When you join the camp, you join normally in an evening. There's a dinner. There's an introduction to the course, and at that time, you enter a 9.5-day vow of silence. And at that time, you also submit your cell phones, computers, books, writing material, reading material, etc. Because for the next 9.5 days, there's literally three activities you're going to do: meditate, maybe light walking, eating, and then your daily like sleeping, washing, etc. So starting next day, your day starts, I believe, at 4 a.m. Where you wake up and start meditating. There are 3 1-hour compulsory sitting meditations in the meditation hall. And then there is one nightly discourse, which is roughly an hour 10 minutes by Goenka ji. There are 2 meals, breakfast in the morning, lunch in the afternoon, and at 5 p.m. if you're a new student, you can enjoy a cup of tea with milk and sugar and a fruit. If you're an old student, you can have a cup of tea, no milk, no sugar, no fruit. And yes, it's physically strenuous. If you try to sit down for 1 hour and you want to be still, the amount of body ache you experience is mind-numbing. And yes, you get used to it, but it's not easy.
And Chuck, you did this for 3 months, every day?
Well,
What was
I was
that
there
like?
for 5 10-day periods of complete meditation, and then I was there for 5 periods when I was a server for others who were in meditation. So it was life-changing. I mean, I had a chance to sit still. I mean, I played football, so I had a lot of body pain and aches, and Barry reminds me, perhaps I have them for many other reasons as well. And I didn't find it, physically challenging like football practice or training, but it was painful to try to sit still. I guess now I look back at it, and since I do it every day, it doesn't seem so painful right now. But as I remember, it was a challenge when I was going through it, but it was rewarding also, and I had never done anything like it, so it was just eye-opening just to learn that I could do it, and actually I remember when I was there that when it was time to leave, I mean, I didn't even want to hear a car radio or anything. I wanted the quiet.
Mudita, let me just jump in here a little bit
Please.
as well. The purpose of 10 days of sitting on your cushion is not to torture you at all. The torture that we might experience is the torture we have within ourselves. Everybody has stress and strain and tensions and different kinds of complexes. Whatever is in the mind, the technique of Vipassana, what you will observe is whatever is in the mind will manifest as a physical sensation on the body. For example, in the English language, I say, I feel angry because I feel it physically. I feel agitated. I feel anxious. I feel whatever I feel. But whatever has arisen mentally, whatever emotion or even thought has arisen mentally, manifests with a physical sensation on our bodies. So imagine if you're sitting there observing the physical sensations, which are directly related to all the stuff we have in our mind. Well, a lot of that negativity within our own minds, when it manifests as physical sensations, it's not pleasant. But the beauty of Vipassana is to learn how to observe that unpleasant, understanding that this is a changing phenomena. And look, every time I hate it, every time I react to it, I make myself miserable. Every time I observe it, understanding it's a changing phenomena, even though there's pain, I don't suffer. The idea is to come out of suffering, not to get rid of pain. Pain is there. Go ahead, Charles.
Sorry, but that was the challenging part for me because I didn't see how that was going to work. But I heard it and I stuck with it. And even now I'm listening to the discourses and I'm saying, oh, that's what he's talking about. So I think that for me, just to learn to sit, to continue to sit, to see that I'm feeling, I guess I do have a busy mind. I'm at, I've had a lot of anxiety. Just to learn to sit and to continue to sit, and then to continue just to observe myself as I go through the day and say, oh, there I go again. But now I can see it happening. And now I can say, oh, it is happening. I can bring it down right now. And I think that might be the beginning of some turn in my lifetime and some really ability to live my life in a new way.
It's interesting, Nitin and Charles. Sorry, go ahead, Barry.
I was just going to say the idea is not to see what's going on, it's to feel everything. We don't react to our thoughts and our emotions. We react to how we feel. So the entire technique of Vipassana is to be with our physical sensations, which are directly related to our mental stuff, learn how to maintain balance of mind with what we are feeling. If we come out of the reaction, we come out of the misery. You're given the example of if we have a big bonfire, big fire, what happens if we keep throwing wood on the fire, fuel on the fire? It will burn forever, it will increase. What happens if we stop throwing fuel on the fire? It will burn whatever fuel it has and eventually go out. When I observe my physical sensations, which are related to the mind, that's the fire as I react. I stop reacting, I stop throwing fuel on that complex, eventually it goes away.
But it wasn't easy for me to stop reacting. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
It still isn't, Charles.
Right. But now I can do a little more, there's a little more of a pause. And that's what I'm beginning to appreciate. There's a little more of a pause. There's a little more of an opportunity for me to slow down, versus maybe not see things differently, but react differently.
How about
interesting,
instead of react?
Both Charles and Nitin, it sounds like the first several days may have been a challenge for you. My husband reported the same thing, that the first 3 days up to 4 days were very difficult. He thought about leaving. He didn't quite understand the concept of love with equanimity and how that relates to self-compassion, and how self-compassion then relates to how you can just love in a better way if you can learn to love yourself. And it was on day 4 that he had some kind of realization and came away on day 10 completely transformed. But Barry, in your experience, the students that do come to the Vipassana Meditation Center, I mean, I'd like to do it, but in this world where we live with rapid, constant stimulation, we're surrounded by devices, our kids are surrounded by devices, and information is just being shot at us at rates that humans have never seen before. I find it difficult to conceptualize how I would turn my mind off for 2 minutes, let alone for 10 days without talking, without a device, without, a coffee machine, without, the meals I'm used to. How successful are the students that you have seen come? Do they stay the entire 10 days?
I would say 99.9% of the people that come stay the entire 10 days. One makes a strong determination when they first come to stay for 10 days, understanding it is not easy. And as far as turning your mind off, you can't. What you can do is learn to develop mastery over your mind, which is why, number one, that morality is important. So you can develop some concentration, which may not turn the mind off, but it's going to start to focus the mind, start to concentrate the mind. You will actually observe how busy this mind really is. But you have to get quite quiet just to observe that. And with that ability to start feeling things through concentration, then you start practicing Vipassana. That does not mean the mind is going to turn off. In fact, you're going to become much more aware of how noisy, how agitated the mind really is. But I would say in this day and age of nonstop stimulation with our devices, with our communications, with everything, it's a pretty good investment of time. 10 days. 10 days is a short period of time in one's life to learn how to observe themselves instead of being completely overwhelmed by all the external stimulation. That 10 days gives one the opportunity to learn to observe themselves. Whereas in our daily lives, someone asked a question earlier about learning on, just over the net, or learning by reading something or whatever like that at home. With that constant stimulation, it's not possible. But when you give up your devices, when you give up your exterior world for that small investment of 10 days, you're actually giving yourself a chance to observe what's really going on inside.
Barry, we have a follow-up question about the children's program that you spoke about. Our audience, our parents, you know, we have communities. Our children's program actually at ICC is one of our biggest serving programs. Is first of all, if you could describe what the children's program looks like, how many days is it, and what age do you recommend that our children start to meditate, and specifically, if it were to be the Vipassana meditation, what age would be ideal?
Well, to actually do a course, it's between 8 and 12. And that is one day, not overnight. And what you learn in that one day, and it's obviously a very relaxed program. No one's asking a child to sit there for an hour without moving or anything to that effect. But what they learn is they will be told about the morality, how important it is, hopefully in words that they will understand. And then they will learn the technique of Anapana meditation, which is the second part of this practice, which is the concentration of mind. Now, we know how agitated our kids can get because we know how agitated we can get. So if a child can learn the technique of just observing their breath between the ages of 8 and 12, that's a wonderful start for the kid. And then maybe to do a little bit more as a teenager, which gives a really good foundation to do a 10-day course once a child turns 18. But I've known many, many parents whose children meditate with them at an extremely young age. There's no reason why the parent cannot teach the child what Anapana is, you know, and then say, okay, I'm going to meditate for a period of time. If you'd like to join me, fine. If they want to sit there for 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, fine, then they get up and go do whatever they're going to do. But I would also say the biggest impact on a child is the parent. So if the parent is the example of cleaning up their own act as much as possible, that's going to have an enormously beneficial impact on their spouse, on their partner, and on their children. The children will want to meditate because you're a good example of the practice yourself.
Can I ask a quick question as well? How does this technique make you more loving and compassionate? Like that's one of the, you know, side effects, outcomes. Could you elaborate, like, how is it possible that, you know, by just, you know, meditating and observing your breath, somehow you can become a more compassionate person?
Well, actually, breath is just one step toward developing wisdom, which is Vipassana. We're talking about adult here now. So if I can develop my own wisdom, means I can learn to start deconditioning my mind, purifying my mind of my anger, of my fear, of my anxieties, of my agitation. The natural byproduct of that is going to be a much more loving, much more compassionate, much more joyful, and much more balanced mind. So it's perfect science again. And now getting back to the children, just imagine a really agitated child, especially at this time of COVID, where these kids have been stuck indoors with the parents, and the parents are as agitated as the children. It's a recipe for difficulty. But imagine if the parent was a meditator and they actually spent time each day calming their own mind, observing their own stuff, coming out of it to a certain extent. And the child actually feels that from the parent. Parent doesn't have to say anything, but they feel that from the parent. And then the child maybe wants to learn a little bit about what the parent is also doing. So the love and compassion that the parent starts to generate has a very beneficial effect on the child. The child will want to follow suit, and it's going to make for a much more loving and compassionate household, even in this time of COVID.
Wonderful. Barry, it seems we just have a few minutes left, but just in sort of a closing thought, this past year has been a particularly stressful one for most people. You know, the pandemic added stresses to people's lives that we are now seeing through reports of higher overdoses, higher suicides, domestic violence, gun violence. It's sad, and the anxiety that's out there, if it could be measured, I'm sure would be off the charts. What have you seen in terms of meditators overcome illnesses such as addictions, mental health diseases, physical ailments, and just anxiety, which, you know, I think that's a very important point right now, because our kids feel the anxiety as well. And it's not just the COVID anxiety, but just anxiety of living in today's very fast-paced pressure cooker world.
Yeah. So imagine, first of all, understand the technique is for that very purpose, not just addiction to alcohol or drugs or any of those substances, but addiction to our anger, our anxiety, our fear. So if we understand the technique of Vipassana, like I said, whatever arises in the mind manifests with a physical sensation on the body. So the person who can observe the physical sensations, which are directly related to that anxiety, the anxiety is going to be stimulated. The anger is going to be stimulated, maybe by all these very difficult, stressful external circumstances of life right now, whether we are rich, whether we're poor, whether we're black or white, Indian, American, Israeli, Arab, whatever it happens to be. Incredible exterior stimulations, external stimulations. But all they do is stimulate my own internal stuff. And when my internal stuff comes up, it manifests with these physical sensations. And if I'm developing the wisdom of the understanding that everything is in a constant state of change, constantly impermanent, and I understand every time I react to this sensation with hatred because it feels so unpleasant, I make myself miserable. Every time I cling to that which is pleasant and it goes away, I make myself miserable. But imagine the mind is able to observe those physical sensations of anxiety, of depression, and not react to them, understanding they're impermanent. That's going to be a much more balanced mind. A balanced mind is going to be a much more happy mind. So even in this time of COVID, with all the external madnesses that are going on, a person who can do this can keep it together even in these difficult times, which has a profound effect on their life. In fact, many of the meditators I talk to are delighted to have been home for a year, even with kids. They want the time because they make best use of the time by cleaning up their own act internally. And that's good for everyone.
Can I add a personal experience? And that is, you know, with COVID, my family and I moved out of the city. We went 100 miles away. And frankly, I was very concerned about how I was going to run my business and keep things going. And I just made a conscious decision by around June or July that I was going to increase my meditation, increase my listening to the Goenka tapes. And within a few weeks, I mean, things were markedly different. I was able to I guess, become more aware of myself and just calm myself down. I think my relationship improved at home a bit, and I'm having, you know, I'm having the time of my life right now. So I am very grateful for the practice.
I think there are certainly silver linings of us all being stuck at home with our children and our families and having time to reflect. Very, very quickly, how can people find information on Vipassana meditation?
Yeah, the general website is www.dhamma.org. From there, one can locate centers around the world, courses around the world, and you can apply directly. If you want to locate a particular center like Dhamma Dharā in Massachusetts, that will link to that site, or you could go to dhamma.org. That will also get you there. It will give you all the information you need. And even if you wanted to talk to someone, you would be very welcome. And as COVID restrictions start to ease up a bit, we would be happy to give anybody a tour as well who lives nearby.
Great. Well, hopefully we can partner with you in the future for our children and other venues. So thank you so much, Barry, Nitin, and Chuck, for your time and educating us. And thank you all to the attendees for joining us tonight. We hope that you found this discussion beneficial and compelling. We will be recording, or we have recorded, we will be posting the recording if you wanted to watch it again or send it to others. And please feel free to reach out to us at ICC at info@iccgreenwich.org. We have a lot of great upcoming programs, so check out our website at iccgreenwich.org and sign up to be on our mailing list. Thank you again. We'll see you all soon.
Thank you, Mutita. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye now.